What's going on, y'all? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Woke Bros. Of course, excuse me, of Wos Speaks. Hate when I do that. Of course, it's your host, Big Wos, aka Wosny Lambre. Shouts to my guy John Gervais on the ones and threes, man. Keeping the trains running on time as usual. Just a couple of obviously major things happening, especially here in Los Angeles. If you've been looking at the news at all recently, there's been, a bunch of protests and, what the media wants to call riots, I would say uprisings against the ICE raids here in Los Angeles. It's just a lot to sort of unpack. Um Stephen Miller, Trump's one of his chief aides. Basically, people credit him with being the kind of architect of the deportation regime of Trump 2.0. It's been reported that he had a meeting with a bunch of ICE agents and told them, yo, stop looking, literally told them to stop looking for criminals and that they should be going to the Home Depots and the barbershops and, literally picking up day workers, farm hands. They're going to graduations and snatching people from graduations, all kinds of craziness. I think, Stephen Miller is, I don't know if a lot of people notice, but he's a Los Angeles native. He's actually from Santa Monica. And I know that people think of Los Angeles and LA as this liberal haven, blah, blah, blah. But Stephen Miller's from the heart of that. And, he's one of the most ghoulish members of the Trump administration, specifically on this immigration topic. It's about like when people are ascribing like white nationalism and xenophobia to the Trump operation, if you will. I think Stephen Miller is squarely at the center of that. And yeah, he's the guy that is spearheading this. And so basically, last Saturday, everything came to a head where ICE agents, flanked by LAPD, around the ICE detention center in downtown LA. And that's another thing that I wanted to say on here. Being as I live here and all of that stuff. If you watch the news, they'll make it seem like LA is on fire and it's just a craziness that's happening. And oh my God, it's so dangerous. It's not. Like basically, it's super confined to one area of downtown. I seen today that there was some situations in Pasadena and a couple of other skirmishes, but it's basically been contained to downtown LA in specific areas in and around the ICE detention center. So of course LAPD is backing them up, and LAPD, nobody's ever had to give them an excuse to want to crush some skulls. And because this is America in 2025, where basically every single police department worth its salt is now its own little baby military militia type of thing, where they get hand-me-downs from the US military, like literally DOD hand like old not being used army equipment that isn't military equipment that isn't state of the art gets passed down to the police departments, to the point where if you see LAPD in the videos and pictures from the last, 4 or 5 days or so, you can't even tell who's LAPD and who's military, which of course brings us to Donald Trump sending the California National Guard to downtown LA. I think it's about 3,000 um enlisted people. Uh Crazy for like multiple reasons. This isn't a case where LAPD was being overwhelmed whatsoever. LAPD is plenty ready. Like again, these aren't the first protests to happen in LA. This doesn't even rise to the level of the mass protests that we saw in 2020 during the Black Lives Matter protests and run, that was just way more well attended, just crazier, honestly. People I think were a lot angrier, amassed. Not to say that there aren't people who aren't angry about the deportation regime, but like that was just a wholly different thing. Like LAPD were the ones dealing with that. So just the idea that you would send the freaking National Guard down here, we'll pause on that for a second, but Trump sends them in. It's illegal what he did. Essentially, the president, that's not his authorization. That like the National Guard is under the command of the governor, the duly elected, democratically elected governor of California is who's actually in charge of the National Guard, and it's at his discretion. And basically, it would be the governor asking, deploying the National Guard, and then of course Trump. He basically is like, we're sending the Marines who haven't gotten down there yet, but they're doing training for riot control, crowd control right now. Just so y'all know, man. Again, I stress this: like the LAPD is more than ready for this. Yes, a couple of them got hit with rocks and all of that stuff, but trust me, they're ready for this. There's no need for a National Guard, and even if they were, it wouldn't be Trump just doing it on his own, right? Like this is just how our decentralized government is supposed to work. And so you might ask yourself, well, what is the point? Like, why would we do that? Like, why are we sending all of these troops down to LA? And I mean, to me, it's just for the mere spectacle. I think Trump sees deportations, immigration as one of his strongest, you know, platform principles. And God knows the tariffs are deeply unpopular. God knows the freaking big, beautiful bill disaster, deeply unpopular. They're about to pass like a horrible bill, deeply just corrupt and cruel bill that's going to be so unpopular. And immigration is basically the last thing, which, by the way, he's losing support on every single day that he has even a modicum of, public will behind, and even to that extent, I think is my like I think they want to pick this fight because they think this is the only thing the public is with the broad public, not the citizens of Los Angeles. We know that ain't true, but they think the broad public is with them on. And just to put my Trump administration hat on really quickly, they're gonna make the argument that these people, these protesters throwing rocks at police, burning flags, burning cars on fire, breaking into businesses, are going to turn the American public off and turn people off to them. However, I think a couple of things. I think one, yes, I think the country broadly had an adverse reaction to Biden's more lenient asylum migrant program, expanding the criteria under which we would allow people to come seek asylum in America. It attracted way more people way faster than large swaths of the company were comfortable with. I think there's something to the idea that people think that too many people came, too many people are here. Some of them need to go back, particularly the ones that are criminals. I think if you're a Republican, you can make the case that you won behind that issue. I would quibble with the details of that. I think, but I do think they could make that argument that there's a broad public will behind those ideas, that the Biden immigration policy took it a little bit too far. We need some retrenchment. We need to do something about it. Trump could make the argument that he broadly has latitude to do that. Cool. And you notice the way they tried to sell this at first, we're sending away the worst of the worst. Allegedly, there were all of these rapists and killers and, child botherers and all of the worst people on planet Earth. We had a swath of them just swarming the streets of America that we were just not putting away and deporting for some reason under the Biden administration. Trump's going to come in and change it. That's how they tried to sell this at first. Clearly, sending barbers and soccer goalies and hairdressers to a freaking gulag in El Salvador. Clearly, the public was not broadly behind that. It looked crazy. It sounded even worse when you hear about the craziness that goes on in this El Salvadorian prison, to the point they're starting to bring some of these people back, which I'm even surprised by. They're seeing that policy start to fail. So again, Stephen Miller sends out the directive, literally go into the hairdressers, go into the barbershops, go to the Home Depots, go where these people are at. Stop looking for only criminals. So they've given up on that. Again, I think they could make that argument that broadly people wanted that. I'm sorry, dude. Like, I think snatching people out of graduations, kindergarten graduations, you're snatching people out of kindergarten graduations. You're snatching people off of strawberry farms and different agricultural sites. Okay, to the point where Trump even had to drop a Truth Social about it. Like, snatching day workers out of Home Depot. I'm sorry, dude. Like, y'all, they may think they have some broad will behind it. People aren't gonna go for that. That's not what people want. People broadly like the idea, like, oh, there's some undocumented people that committed crimes. Yeah, we got to get them out of here. That's not right. We don't believe in that in America. I'm sure a bunch of people, if you polled that question, they'd be cool with it. They see the images of how this is actually happening in practice, how freaking armies are being erected to go to Los Angeles, California, and armies being erected, and this is what we're doing to a woman basically trying to get back to her crib in DC, LA. Bring this up for me, please, Jerv. This lady's just walking, trying to get to her crib.
Well, they're telling her to move, but that's a public sidewalk. They're telling her to move. Watch, if they shoot her.
Unbelievable. Yeah. This lady clearly. You think these images circulating? You think people gonna go for this? You think long term people are gonna go for that? Like, really? It's just no. And I get it. They're gonna, the right wing, Elon's Twitter machine, Fox News, all of these right wing influences, they're gonna definitely circulate the cars burning and the Mexican flag waving and the American flag burning, and people, look, this is what Democrats are defending. Look. They're gonna run with that. But I promise you, videos like that making circulations are gonna have its impact on public opinion. God forbid the US military starts opening fire on its own citizens. That's not going to be popular. I'm sorry. I get it. The looting and all of that shit. Like, yeah, normies in the burbs, people that don't live in big cities, like middle America type of people, broadly Republican people who all they've been fed is the chaos that's happening in these blue cities, these liberal cities. It's just chaos, where it's just like, if you live in Los Angeles, there's no chaos. It's safe as hell. You live in New York, there's no chaos. It's safe as hell. You go to ATL, just go down the list of these big, quote unquote, liberal cities. There's no chaos for real. But that's part of like what you get fed on Elon's propaganda machine, right-wing media, right-wing influencers on social. Like, that's what you're going to get fed about big cities. But like, this stuff is going to make its rounds too. And people are not going for that. And of course, Trump goes out on a press conference and he's like, yeah, yo, the city would have burnt without us sending the National Guard. It's like, it's cap. It's actually the opposite. LAPD had it under control. LAPD was deployed from the start. Again, protesters, like, you go into a protest knowing the point of it is that you're going to meet resistance from the powers that be, right? You're literally protesting against power. And so people go to protests expecting the cops to basically show up and be complete dicks about everything. That goes without saying. And, the LAPD was there doing their part, being the dicks of the situation. And then, of course, ICE, who, again, in America, we're talking about freaking America, dudes with masks on, no badge. They don't flash, no badge to nobody. Their cars are unmarked, snatching people off the streets. This is literally, like, I kind of recoil whenever I hear a certain type of lib just always constantly talking about fascism. Like, it's like, okay, let's, like, we don't need that lens to analyze what's actually happening in our country that has nothing to do with Europe. At the same time, though, a bunch of masked individuals not declaring themselves as officers of the federal government, snatching people off the street and throwing them in vans, like, that's literally insane. And again, that's not going to be popular with the broader public. You know what I mean? And so Yeah, and so Donald Trump comes out and he claims that he basically saved LA from burning down, blah blah blah. He's the savior. It's just a whole all it is, y'all. I'm telling you, is just spectacle. It's a fake show of force. It's a way to, and another thing, distract from the horrible trade deal, the horrible tax bill they're about to pass, the insane wealth transfer they're about to execute, literally stealing money out the pockets of average Joe so that the richest people on in our country could get more resources if they weren't doing well enough. It's all a distraction. Now, you know, obviously, y'all know, again, I'm against the immigration policy. I'm somebody who thinks we got like plenty more room for people in this country. It's a big ass country. I think, immigrants make new people make our country what it is. I think the fact that people are dying to get here is proof positive that we are a great country. Like, there's a reason why people from all over the world like would die to have an American passport. They travel all these crazy lengths to get here specifically. Like, I think there's something to that. I don't think we should be shying away from that. Yes, I do think administratively processing people, the idea that people would commit like felonies and that we would protect them. I don't necessarily agree with that. But again, I think that's just an obvious thing. That's so ancillary to the mainstream of people who immigrate here. Obviously, that's my opinion. Um, but there's a lot of people in the country that would disagree with that. And I don't think you have to be some raging racist person to disagree with my own thoughts on immigration and what we could be doing to better process folks that are coming here that are literally escaping gang wars, you know, economic just peril, where places just are wholly unstable, countries that we're sanctioning the hell out of. And so they're actual people, they're the rank and file could barely eke out a decent existence for themselves. Like, yeah, I think we should be accepting a lot of those people into the country. But I do think, you know, as a left, we should be foregrounding an actual infrastructure for how we want to go about executing that. Ain't nobody gonna tell me that, oh, we got 10 million new people under Biden. Oh my God. Like, the idea that this country can't absorb 10 million new people, I think is absurd. But whatever. Mind you, this is as we're complaining about falling birth rates, millennials and Gen Zers not wanting to have babies, not wanting to start families, blah. We out one side of our mouth, we're talking about we need to encourage people to be starting families, et cetera, et cetera. Where we are worried about population decrease out of one side of our mouths, particularly on the right. But yet, oh, no, no, no. These new immigrants, no. And yes, like, I don't think as my man Freddie DeBoer once pointed out, I don't think a dude from Venezuela who can't speak English should work at the McDonald's drive-thru. Yeah, you should probably have to learn how to speak English. It's a push and pull. It's a give and a take. Yeah, these people are sharing their culture with us, but they do need to absorb a certain level of American culture, language being one of them, to participate in the society. I'm not precious enough to pretend that isn't something that needs to happen and needs to be a part of the discussion about bringing new people on and how we need to manage it. I'm not dumb enough to think that these things don't matter. But I'm sorry, I don't buy the rhetoric that immigrants are what's ruining our country, or why we can't build new housing, or why we can't build better infrastructure, or why people out in rural America still can't get access to stuff like broadband and shit like that. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not going for that narrative that this is all the problems we have in our country are caused by, undocumented people. I think that's a load of crap. Um, but yeah. Anyway, that's what's happening in Los Angeles. It's not a war zone. Like, I think Trump is just doing a lot. I think this is gonna backfire. The uglier this looks, it's gonna look ugly for Trump. I know they're banking on just, you know, purple haired protesters waving Mexican flags in the streets and cars burning to turn the public against the cause of, like, yo, maybe I shouldn't just be snatching people out of kindergarten graduations. I know they're banking on that, but I think honestly, their hubris is going to hurt them. I do believe that. They're already losing support on immigration, which was their strongest pillar of their whole freaking agenda. So I'm not going for it. Just before we get out of here, maybe like 30, maybe like an hour ago, New York Times and CNN reported that Israel has executed an airstrike in Tehran in Iran. Um, just probably the worst of all possible um outcomes. Listen, y'all, whether we go, you're in the military, you got somebody that's close to you in the military that would have to go fight a war in Iran on behalf of Israel to the benefit of what American citizens. I promise you, there's to no benefit. Iran is not a threat to you or your family. No Iranian, militant is coming to strangle your babies in their cribs. They're not going to reach our shores to carry out attack. There's no Iranian threat to American citizens whatsoever. And in so much as U.S. interests, our interests globally are concerned, like, starting a war with Iran is the opposite of what we want to do. I promise you that. Like, there is no U.S. interest in it. We'd be literally doing this on behalf of the Israeli regime. And the reason why it matters whether you're actually going to physically go to war or not, just know, or somebody close to you will, which matters. One, the amount of death and carnage to the people over there, like, I'm talking about catastrophic in terms of the human toll. Like, and again, for what? For what? The human toll. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people will die from this. We're talking about a war that will stretch out 4, 5, 6, 7 years because of how formidable Iran's military is, the nature geographically, like the region, like how mountainous the place is. Like, bruh, before we even get to just like their entire population would rise up against this. Like, this idea that, like, oh, we'd go in there and we'd be, you remember they gave us that spiel in Iraq? They're gonna greet us, we'd be greeted as liberators. No, no, no. The entire population would rise up against that US Israeli coalition. Um, you think Iraq was a disaster? I'm talking about tenfold. It would be horrific. So forget about the human toll, forget about strategically, we're not gonna, like, it's not gonna happen. Economically, y'all want to talk about we can't afford it, dude? Like, trillions spent in Iraq and Afghanistan, bruh. You want to talk about money being just wasted I think we spent something like 100 billion when Trump first got back in office bombing the Houthis. I think it was something like I think we spent close to 100 billion just bombing the Houthis. And by the way, accomplished nothing. We ended up just negotiating a peace situation with the Houthis to let our ships through and let us rock. We bombed them into oblivion for billions of dollars, upwards of 100 billion, got nothing out of it. So now what do you think is good? And that was just over the course of a few weeks to get nothing out of with a group that we eventually, made peace with. What do you think is going to happen in Iran? Again, on the behalf of Israel, because they've been dying for this to happen. Netanyahu's been saber rattling for years. It was like 20 years ago, he said Iran was on the verge of having a nuclear weapon. Trying to saber rattle, trying to get the U.S. to invade Iran on behalf of Israel because they can't do it on their own. They don't have the weaponry. They damn sure don't have the manpower. Like they would get creamed if they tried to invade Iran, just the IDF. They know that. They know they can't do anything without Big Brother. And so, yeah, make no mistake. Like that's what this attack is. They want to encourage a retaliation and encourage an escalation, and so that the U.S. has to get involved. That's what's happening right in front of our eyes. And I don't think there's a bigger story, honestly. This is bigger than tariffs. This is bigger than the tax bill. This is bigger than mass deportation. Like if our country started an invasion of Iran, disaster. I'm talking about disasters economically that every single American would feel. And for what? A country that has no chance of harming us. No, like in fact, they're at the negotiation table with us right now to normalize relations, which is what I would suspect if the reports are to be, Washington insiders, national security state insiders, if they're to be believed. That was the whole point of this attack, is to scuttle the peace talks between America and the Iranian regime. The Israelis want regime change. They want, they want the Ayatollah and the religious Islamic Republic regime or whatever that was installed after, they kicked out our guy, the Shah, in the late 70s or whatever. Yeah, it's the number one thing to be monitoring, to be honest with you. Because, like, again, bro, that shit would be a disaster. Not to mention the amount of Americans that would go over there and die for no reason. Just our freaking resources depleted to the bone to execute this. And for what? For no reason whatsoever. Anyway, that's our show for today, man. Again, big shout out to my brother John Gervais on the ones and threes. Become a Patreon at patreon.com/count the dings, man. Support the great content that we're doing for all you guys. We'll see you guys next week. Peace. I'm out of here.